In 2018, I uploaded this music video of a piece I wrote titled Clouds. Back then, I had made the recording using a software instrument library developed by the Vienna Philharmonic. Virtual instruments are sound collections recorded by real musicians, which are then turned into a set of digital pre-programmed sounds that can be controlled with a computer. This is easily applied with music production software used by songwriters, producers, and composers. And in my case, it makes it possible to use great orchestral sounds when a symphonic orchestra is not available. At the time, this was the best option available to me as an independent composer, and this version was painstakingly rendered to communicate the artistic intention behind this piece as faithfully as possible, despite the fact that these sounds come from a computer. However, as good as these virtual instruments are, like any virtual media, it has its limitations. In this video, I will tell you how I put these limitations to the test by making a new recording of it and playing every instrument myself as a one-man orchestra. Now, which version is better? You will be the judge. So stick around and I will take you through this detailed 4-part behind the music rockumentary. And at the end, we will put both versions to the test. This is Eka Rivera, and this is the story of a crazy 100-hour, one-man orchestra recording. Now here comes the editing and mixing process. My goodness, at this point, I think I had already spent at least 40 or 50 hours, between 40 and 50 hours of work just getting the recording done. I had no idea what ordeal the mixing process was going to be. So anyway, let me start off by saying that after visiting the Universal Audio Showcase this year at NAMM and seeing that display, I was really eager to try out the new analog simulation software called Luna. If you've heard about it or you probably even tried it, I'm going to say a few things about it. I was really curious to test their Neve summing and the Universal Audio plugins that I already had. And having done analog mastering before, direct to tape, and making many recordings with tape multitracks in my early days with certain bands, I wanted to put Luna to the test with my recording. So just first impressions of Luna. Doing automation on Luna was a breeze. I was really surprised. It has a good workflow for both the recording phase and the mixing phase, although I did notice some occasional slowing down and it becoming a little jittery on the performance while doing the playback when using a high track count, which in this case, it's a pretty high track count, and I recorded them at 96K. However, once I started using the Neve summing, I noticed that it rendered great dynamics. It has an overdriven distortion when using the Neve summing feature that is actually very pleasant. Very nice overtones, and there was a certain mid-range edginess that made the mid-range sound a lot more clear, but also the distortion itself was very pleasant to hear, very typical of analog systems, and so I was very happy with what I was getting out of Luna. So it did perform like analog gear, so kudos to them. They actually did it. I did try the tape feature on Luna, the tape plugins, such as Oxide. I tried Oxide first, and then I tried the Studer machine with different settings. It actually was able to render really good analog tone. The tape tone was pretty authentic.
but not the dynamics. I think um, after using tape all of my first years in music, I got very used to how it sounds and how it responds to dynamics. And the dynamic range on the plugin, I don't know. I wasn't really that convinced about it. But as far as the tone, oh yeah, yeah, it sounds like tape. That in that sense, yeah, it works. I try to stay away from compression for the most part, maybe just a little bit in the master channel because for classical music you really don't want to compress it. You want those big dynamics, you know. So I also had to go through a brand new learning curve for me as far as mastering because in my producing years, I actually mastered for CD, mastered for uploads to iTunes, and I also mastered for vinyl, but I had never mastered for streaming services, and they have quite different requirements. So now I had to practice and get good at the new learning curve for the RMS overall level type of mastering, which I think is great. Learning how to master with RMS instead of peak and mastering for loudness instead of mastering for loudness. Now I was mixing for dynamics, which is great. You know, I always wanted more dynamics in the music because that's how music sounds in a live situation. So I was always more going towards a live sound, even if it's a recording. You know, I always enjoy recordings that sounded like that, and I really miss that from the tape and vinyl days. You know, although I know that vinyl is coming back for a good reason. Um, so I finished the mix. I was really happy with how everything was performing. You know, and then I tested it in my car stereo. Yeah, so first impression, great dynamics, great tone, great presence, impressive bass, but there was a lot of hiss on the violin tracks, and it's the noise floor on that hiss was so high that it was very obnoxious, and it made it so that it was disruptive from the music, you know. So I had to do something about it. So here here I came back to the mixing desk and started to look for new ways of EQing it, you know, going through a process of elimination. I started first by cutting a little highs on the EQs on the bus, but did a mix down like that, tested it again, no luck. Then I came back and checked all my gain staging throughout the plugins. It got a little better, but not enough. So I kept doing tests with that idea. It didn't really make a huge difference. Then I tried a new set of plugins on the master channel. Uh, Again, only mediocre results. I kept experimenting with compression, little compression, no compression. Did several tests like that. No, the hiss just wouldn't go away. Um, and then finally, I decided to keep an open mind and just try remixing it from scratch in Logic because I'm familiar with it. It's the program that I used for over 15 years, and it always had a very neutral sound. So I was gonna try it there. So here I am in Logic, and I checked my gain staging very carefully, and then I did some parametric EQ sweeps on each channel, and even I even tried the really famous Gullfoss EQ on the master channel when the mix was done using absolutely no compression because that tends to bring the noise floor higher sometimes. Um, I was testing different types of high cuts on the bus channels and the master channel carefully, and all of that only with meh results. The hiss was um, less, less intense, less noticeable, but it was still there. It was still bothering me. So, and I didn't want to release anything like that, of course. So I started to figure at that point, and this is 3 weeks after, pretty much every night, devoting a few hours to try to get rid of that noise. So I started to figure that maybe my choice of using a tube amp, the universal audio tube amp, nothing wrong with the tube amp, but maybe my choice of using that for the violins 16 times, because it's 8 violins, eight first violins and 8 second violins, the summing of all that tube signal. Well, tube tends to be a little hissy if you don't use it right, or if you use it too much. So here you have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of tube signal. So I thought that maybe that was why. Plus the increasing distance between recordings by moving the chairs further and further away from the microphone maybe made that even worse. But in any case, after spending so many more hours in this, I started to think about, well, maybe I should re-record the violins. I'm not crazy about the idea. That's another 16 overdubs that I really didn't want to do over. So I stopped for a while. I wanted to rest my mind and my ears for maybe a week, until I decided to try feathering the individual track volumes from the violin that was closest to the microphone to the one that was furthest from the microphone. And what I did was level them in a way that the ones that were closer, since they have less noise, keep those at 0, and then start decreasing the volume level as the violins get further and further away from the mic. On top of that, I decided to do a pretty obvious high cut on the violins that were further away. I think I did it on 4 of them, and the other 4 I just left them as is. Basically, I did no EQing other than low cuts when needed, and the few roll-offs on the high end for the violins. And now when I finished the mix, I did the volume automation, did 0 compression, used very simple settings on and plugins on the master channel, did a mix down of that. Then I went and did the infamous car stereo test, and it was beautiful. That actually worked. So all I needed to do is just come back to the mixing desk and tweak a few automation parts, to make sure that the volume levels are well balanced, and play around a little bit more with the stereo image. Do a proper mastering session, and mix it down. So after that, I kept listening to it in the car for several days, and I could not hear the hiss at all. It was finally gone. So after this, I would easily say that yes, it took around maybe 90 to 100 hours of work to finally arrive at this result.